Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Prefect. I don't know whether Jacques Attali is in this room, but I'll greet him later on. I'd like to say a few words about what this government is doing for positive economy. That is the nitty-gritty of what the government is working on based on the report which was given by Jacques Attali to our head of state last week, to draw some lessons and maybe implement some decisions that will contribute to the economic biodiversity of our national economy, considering not only the short but also the long term, not only as a corporation or an NGO or a mutual fund, the so-called organizations of the solidarity-based economy, but also for a conventional corporation. Could there be some fertilization throughout these economic players so that we wonder about the environmental impact of production and the social impact of wealth creation? I'd like to criticize, however, Jacques Attali. I listened to him yesterday morning when he was on France Inter Radio. He said there are three categories of political leaders. First, the ones who say there is a crisis, so let's wait and see because it's a crisis. The second category says the crisis is over, so let's not move because the crisis is behind. And the third category, about which he said yesterday, that it was the category of those political leaders that are impossible to find, that is those who would anticipate the crisis to introduce reform in the economic model. And I think he's a bit harsh on the political decisions that have been made recently, not only by France, but by other European countries and emerging countries. There is an intention clearly to draw the lessons from this crisis by trying not to slow down the economic growth, but try and make sure that consumption and production systems would be more respectful for the environment and the social consequences of production. And this is translated into very specific commitments, which will be in the future laws if the French Parliament will vote the law that I will be presenting to them in November. And this will be echoing one of the recommendations of the Attali report, as we call it, the latest one, which has been published. There's a long pile of Attali reports, but the latest one is the one that suggests to change the purpose of companies so that they would contribute to general common good. And through this process, we'd like to give the opportunity to young entrepreneurs to be social and solidarity-based entrepreneurs without necessarily being an NGO, an association, or a mutual fund. It could be a limited registered company. Some profits could be a possible reserve that is not to be shared with the shareholders for the future of the company, so that a young entrepreneur, somebody who has ideas and is innovative, and by making his company more meaningful and giving it more purpose, can do it with this so-called status of solidarity-based and social company. Mr. Attali makes a distinction between short-term and long-term in his report. This report is a great source of inspiration for me, but has also confirmed many of my intuitions, but rather not really intuitions, but rather our diagnosis of the French economy and the need to highlight those who indeed are entrepreneurs, but also want to include as many people in their activities. In our future law, for instance, public contracts will be awarded more specifically to those companies that are geared at precarious people, like disabled people, people who are underprivileged because they were unemployed for a long time. And this is requiring on the size of company better management for those people who've been at the fringes of society for a long time. So that's a principle that will be in our law, that is, some public contracts will be specifically awarded to those companies that are recognized by the law as companies providing solidarity-based services and recruiting people who've been unemployed for a long time, for instance. No. Jacques Attali and many experts around him, because I see several people here in this room who have greatly contributed to this work, is also the fact that in the future, in the addition of the competitiveness clusters, there will be other clusters where companies, standard private companies and non-profit-making companies or organizations will work together in training center, research center, with service provision centers to cooperate and work together. These clusters will be suggested under law, and a call for proposal with several million euros involved will be launched to promote, indeed, the emergence of these clusters so that the non-profit-making private organization, public sectors will work on projects that are based on the local realities of territories. I'm sorry for the French abbreviation PTC, as we call it in French, so the economic cooperation local clusters will help to make a diagnosis of what are the needs in the given territory or region and a community to avoid a brain drain, to help to relocate employment locally or to create new jobs that do have a positive environmental impact. Like in Saint-Étienne, for instance, there's one for culture. Elsewhere, we have one on innovation. There are some 15 clusters that have naturally emerged without any intervention of the state and the government. We want to help them grow bigger and promote the emergence of other forms of cooperation, and that's part of the short-term suggestions and recommendations made by Jacques Attali. I'd like also to talk about another measure which seems to me key as to the way we want to help finance the economy. In France, as an entrepreneur, when you want to innovate socially, it's difficult to find some support from a private or public bank. Technical innovation, they know what it is, they see what will be the outcome, but what is social innovation and how can you fund this? What we notice today in our modern economies is that there are plenty of social needs that are unmet neither by the public nor the private sectors. And they do justify, for instance, the promotion of some specific projects for nursing home centers, for instance, to take care of the elderly, and also care centers for children, daycare centers. We've talked a lot about many other things, and not always about social-related aspects. Our government made a commitment that over the next 5 years, new jobs would be created so as for children. There are many single families in France, like in my municipality in the outskirts of Paris, and this number of families is on the rise. And many often these are women with very young children. These women sometimes work very early in the morning or very late at night, and there is no solution for them to take care of their children. And it is sometimes an obstacle preventing these women from accessing the labor market. Therefore, the need for these municipalities in urban areas, but also in rural areas, to develop solutions to provide care to these children for these single women, because these single families are often single women who cannot have access to the labor market because of that. So an offering will be provided by the government so that in the kindergarten, for instance, they will take children at an earlier age. Non-profit making organization with creches or daycare centers that are managed by companies or by parents. This is a co-production strategy to meet a social need, and that is positive economy. That's an example of positive economy, because this one is based on innovation, on the desire to start entrepreneurship activities without limiting the responsibility of this activity to a single actor, to a single player. And that's really a paradigm shift in France, because in France people tended a bit too much to rely on the public services and general services. And I can say that the contribution of the European contribution has not always been positive to maintain a high level of public services in Europe, but I don't want to open the debate here because we could also talk about negative economy. But here this is a positive economy because it will help to have some co-production which will help to promote non-profit making businesses in France. I was told there is a timer to make sure that I check the time I'm still located. I have another 10 minutes. Now, if you're really bored after 10 minutes, I'm sorry for that, but I still have 10 minutes, so I'll carry on. So our priority is to change our approach in order to better meet social needs, people's needs. And there's one thing which is the sinews of war. Whether you're talking about positive economy or not, that's money. How can you finance a project? I said that we're going to finance social innovation in the future. That will be thanks to a fund funded by regions and by the French sovereign fund called BPI France. But there might also be some projects where they do not need the help of the BPI, but can rely only on the local players. This social innovation fund will fund projects from a fairly simple definition of social innovation. Social innovation is meeting a social need discovered in a territory that is unmet, and what will be invented there maybe reproduce a solution that has been adopted elsewhere. And that's an example that is very dear to me. It is terrible to think that for the last 25 years in France, infants are taken in crèches, and you don't have crèches that are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's very innovative in France, and that's very important because some people do not have standard working hours. They work at night, they work in the evening, and that's important to have solutions to take care of these small children, toddlers. And in France, we haven't been able to replicate social innovations because we do not have the structures and organization to do that, and we do not have the financing to reproduce these models. The Social Innovation Fund will be involved, but BPI France will also be involved with 500 million euros made available for projects coming from players of a solidarity-based and social economy. You only might say 5,000 euros, and then Mr. Dufour will have to make whatever he wants with these monies, and then he produces his report at the end of the year to justify that he's put a few thousands of euros in some small-scale project. This is not exactly what we're asking. What we're asking to BPI is to work on financial tools, instruments, and vehicles that are going to meet the needs of those players of non-profit making organizations. Sometimes they need credit, sometimes they need equity, microcredit, microfinancing, sometimes they need a funding of a greater scale at the level of the whole territory or just a small region. So much so that a social and solidarity-based company will not be turned down just because of its status or the capital and equity registration. And that's the work that has been performed by BPI. I'd like to commend the work that they've done because 2 months ago they've announced through Nicolas Dufour, his general manager, that such instruments have been developed, including a loan that is based on kind of crowdfunding system to help and promote the funding of these small-scale projects. And these type of participatory loan will be based on an online crowdfunding platforms, just like the ones that already exist. And BPI France will also be involved in some crowdfunding solutions. And it is reflecting the intention of our government to try and encourage all these emerging projects, promoting the so-called economic biodiversity in our country. So those are but a few commitments of our government. I'd like to insist on the fact that maybe there are some people from banks here in this room. The problem is not only with technical solution you can develop, and the piping sometimes can be very complex before you discover that in order to fund you need 10 kilos of potatoes to have 1 drop of spirit. Had it been the case, we would have missed our objective. Our goal is to make sure that through the down payments that can be paid back for social innovation is to support social and solidarity-based entrepreneurs to the very completion of his project. And I'd like to compare this with some initiatives that have been launched in the UK. I do respect the special features and cultural aspects of each country. I attended the G8 Summit on Social Impact conference, which was convened by David Cameron. And they invited us so that we would think about potential new instruments for social innovation. The British side on one hand, and the French and the Americans on the other hand, different ideas on social innovation. You have the social impact bonds, as they're called. That is, the yield of a bond will be based on the social revenue if you want to avoid prisoners from committing new offenses. And if you reduce it, you will more or less have a yield that will be more or less higher depending on the rates. But when a social impact bond is deployed in a country where the government is still present and you still have mediation organization, is different from a country where you have not so much of a presence of a state, an intervening state, such as in France, Germany, or even the US. So assessing the efficiency of an action cannot be done in the same way. And we work with some Americans on similar programs, that is, a down payment that has to be paid back. If your project fails, you do not have to pay back, and if you succeed, you pay back. That's the philosophy that we have adopted for this social innovation fund. I'm saying this because everybody is focusing on social impact finance today. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll be aware about those statements on positive economy that is all the rage today. The first contribution to positive economy is to pay your taxes as a taxpayer. I'm thinking about some companies who set up a foundation and they don't pay their taxes. And that's also a message we need to convey. It's not about raising taxes, but those who want to be part of positive economy should also adopt approaches such that they wouldn't go through tax havens and go through tax optimization, so that at the end of the day, they do not contribute, which is the basic duty of a company, contribute to the good, the common good of the population by paying corporate taxes. This is echoing the debate on the budget that is currently taking place in France, not because we're obsessed with taxes, but it's just good to remind sometimes some basic things, such as taxes, when we talk about positive economy. And now I'd like to talk to very young people here. I've seen many students and pupils and high school students here. What is positive and optimistic here is that people are really interested in that. In Paris, 15% recently at the professional fair on entrepreneurship was dedicated to social entrepreneurship. So you have cooperatives, mutual funds, non-profit making organizations. But there are many young entrepreneurs, individuals who want to set up their own business in ways that will help them to raise the necessary fund to deploy their business, but their purpose is social and environmental. And that is something that should be supported. This will be taken into account in our future programs and laws. And solidarity-based and social businesses is certainly the most efficient instrument to fertilize the conventional economy. and to help disseminate the very good principles of social and solidarity-based principles. But when you're private and non-profit making, it doesn't mean that you're not making profit and that you're losing money. It just means that you're a private company, you're making profit. You do not forget the meaning of profit or benefit, as we call it in France, and that benefit means it's good for all, and this money goes back to the company or serves the interest of the local communities. It means that those people consider that is part and parcel of their bylaws and status, etc. Now, the fact that we're fueling the economic biodiversity through these initiatives is good for the French economy, is good for France, and it means that we're creating wealth and value and also employment, but ultimately it does have a positive impact on social cohesion and the environment. And I think it is an outstanding mission for those who haven't been fortunate enough to be baby boomers, who don't know whether they're going to have a pension when they retire. But I strongly encourage you to work along those lines and to commit yourselves in favor of social entrepreneurship. It is a noble cause, a very good cause for you and for the country. Thank you.